Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
You might have some visions. You might hear the audio differently. You might have different thoughts come into your mind that you kind of think about or reflect upon. You might have memories from the past come up for you that you kind of see from a different point of view. I always think about it. It's like we're kind of getting into this like third person point of view of ourselves, which is a really valuable experience to have, to see like, hey, like maybe I misinterpreted this differently in some way, or maybe like I always labeled this experience as really bad and scary, but I am re-experiencing this again and I'm feeling compassion for myself.
You're listening to Make Some Noise podcast, episode number 600 with guest Kristin Arden. Welcome to Make Some Noise podcast, your guide for strategies, tools, and insight to empower yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Owen, global speaker, entrepreneur, life coach since 2007, and author of 3 books that have been translated into 18 languages and are available in 22 countries. Each week, I'll bring you a guest or a lesson that will help you maximize unshakable confidence, master resilience, and make some noise in your life. You ready? Let's go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm excited because I've wanted to get someone on to talk specifically about ketamine therapy who is in the healthcare industry and works directly with it. If you remember, I had my friend Brendan on a few weeks ago. If you missed it, I'll pop that link in the show notes. And he has been through ketamine therapy. And I wanted to get his experience. Like, what was it like? What were your takeaways? Did it help you? You know, are you glad that you did it? That type of thing. But then I also wanted to get somebody who, again, works in the industry, is a clinician of some kind. And that's where Kristin comes in. She's a psychiatric nurse practitioner, which is such an interesting. Any of you listening who are psychiatric nurse practitioners or know them, I considered it as a career, actually. But it's fascinating what she does and how she got into this work. And so I wanted to have her on. And she works for Mindbloom, which is the company that I'm undergoing ketamine therapy with. Also, if you want to be in the know on my journey with that, because I'm not going to be going into detail here on this podcast feed, but I set up a private secret password. No, it's not. But it is a private feed. So you do have to sign up to get those episodes. AndreaOwen.com/journey. And I've already recorded my first episode where I talk about my experience with my first 2 of 6 ketamine therapy sessions, which have been really interesting. So if you want to hear more about that, head on over to AndreaOwen.com/journey and you can grab those. It's free. It's a free podcast. And let me tell you a little bit about Kristin also. But before I do, Mindbloom does not sponsor this podcast. They are great, and I wanted to talk about them because, again, I've been using them. I've been really happy with it. But you will hear the term the company Mindbloom, because that's where Kristin works, and that's where I'm doing my ketamine therapy. They are offering a discount for my people, though. So my people, that sounds so weird. I don't know what else to say. I didn't want to say podcast audience because then that makes it sound like they're a podcast sponsor, which they're not. But for my community, I'll say that, my community. The link will be in the show notes. It's mindbloom.com/AndreaO100. And that's where you can learn more about it and see if you're even a good candidate for ketamine therapy. So let's get into the show. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our guest. Kristin Arden is a lead clinician at Mindbloom and is a board-certified psychiatric nurse practitioner with over 15 years experience working in mental health. Her work has been instrumental in the development of Mindbloom's treatment methodologies. In addition to work at Mindbloom, she is a guest lecturer at NYU on topics such as psychiatric therapy and substance use disorders, and practices addiction medicine from a harm reduction mindset with individuals in the justice system. She graduated from NYU's Psych NP program with additional specialization in substance use disorders and has a Doctor of Nursing practice from Rush University. So without further ado, here is Kristin. Kristin, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to spend some time together today.
Well, and if anyone's listened to my podcast over the last couple of years, they've probably heard me either asking guests who I know have either done it for therapeutic purposes or have it as part of their practice. And they know that I'm very interested in psychedelic therapy. And I am super excited to have you on, partly because I've partnered with Mindbloom. And to be fair, everyone, I want everyone listening, I was prepared to sign up for Mindbloom on my own. And the universe was like, here you go. And someone landed in my inbox and said, hey, we heard that you're interested in psychedelic therapy. Do you want to maybe partner with us? So I'm really excited about that. But also, as of recording, we're recording this in like the middle of March. I haven't gone through it yet. So I am very green. And that's why I'm glad to have you on. You not only, what is your actual job that you do at Mindbloom in regard to ketamine therapy?
Yeah, so I'm the care delivery lead at Mindbloom. My professional training or my degrees, I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I have a doctorate of nursing, and I've worked in mental health for like 20 years or so, in all different settings. And I was the first clinician at Mindbloom. So I've been with them for about 4.5 years, and I've co-authored our protocols, and I'm in charge of all things related to how we provide care to individuals.
So you're in it. Okay. And one of the reasons also that I wanted to have someone on who, because I've actually talked to other nurse practitioners and emailed back and forth with some people to have them on the show. And it just happened to be you that came on. And the reason I wanted to start with ketamine therapy is because, and correct me if I'm wrong, in my understanding, ketamine therapy is a great start in terms of psychedelics. Like you don't maybe want to start with like an ayahuasca or an MDMA. Like, is it fair to say that ketamine is a good sort of entry point?
I think they're all serve different purposes. One of the benefits along that lines with ketamine is the time commitment to it, right? So this is anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour of an experience, where MDMA or psilocybin, I mean, we're talking anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. Ayahuasca might be a couple days. So I think in that context, just the time in the experience is easier for people to feel comfortable with, because they know like this is going to be over soon.
A couple of days, that's intense. Mm-hmm. Even 6 hours to be, I was going to say out of your mind, like kind of are. 30 to 60 minutes sounds a lot more doable. So let me back up a little bit. Can you kind of take us through and hold our hand and explain like what is ketamine therapy for people who have no idea and are hearing about it for the first time?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's helpful to first start with like, what is ketamine? Yeah. So ketamine is a dissociative anesthetic. It was approved by the FDA for use in anesthesia in 1970. And sometime after that, physicians or clinicians and patients started realizing like, hey, maybe this also has a positive effect on mood. People were coming out of surgery saying like, all right, like I'm recovering, but also my depression is feeling better. So researchers began exploring ketamine for mental health indications. And in 2000, the first paper looking at ketamine as a treatment for depression was published. Since then, there's been hundreds of papers, or well over 100 papers published on ketamine looking at specific mental health indications. So I think that's a little bit just helpful background of like, how did we get here? Ketamine is a medication that we classify as a rapid acting antidepressant, meaning that instead of having to wait like 2 to 6 weeks for positive effects of an SSRI, ketamine, sometimes people are feeling better the next day. Ketamine is what we call glutaminergic, meaning that it works with glutamate, where like SSRIs work with serotonin. And why that's an important distinction is that it makes ketamine a great option for people who've maybe tried a couple SSRIs and it hasn't really worked for them, because like instead of trying another SSRI that's doing kind of the same thing as the last one you took, like why not try something that's working differently and see if that helps. The other benefit to that is, like, say you're like half better with an SSRI but still not feeling great. Ketamine is a great addition to, a current treatment plan for depression, because it's working differently. So we don't have to worry about those drug to drug interactions.
Okay. And so without getting like too clinical, can you kind of explain it like you would like a fifth grader, if you will? How does it actually work in your brain?
Yeah. So,
or your body or wherever.
Yeah. So the way I like to think about how ketamine works is thinking about how it works in two ways. One is what happens in your brain when you take it, and two, what happens during the experience. So I like to think about how ketamine works in your brain as kind of like a fertilizer for our brain. And why that's important is that we know the effects of chronic depression, anxiety, trauma, stress really does a number on the parts of our brain that we need to be like working their best for change to happen. It's the parts of our brain that are responsible for behavior change, for forming new memories, emotional regulation. So ketamine, because it enhances neuroplasticity, kind of just revitalizes that part of our brain. So that's happening in your brain all the while you're going through an experience that for some people feels like a deep meditation, where maybe you have an experience where it's like, typically on a daily basis, you have all these thoughts come in and you grab onto one and you ruminate on it, you catastrophize, and you can't let those thoughts pass. But in this experience, you're able to. So you then start to see your ability in letting these kind of thoughts flow. Maybe you have an experience that brings a lot of insights to you, right? So it's like you have an experience where there's this big download of information, and instead of trying to process all this information with a brain that's tired and beaten down from, those chronic effects from mental illness, we're processing all that information at a time where our brain is flexible and really in a great state for change.
Interesting. Okay. That's sort of how I understood it. And so the very first time I even ever heard of it was, I think this was just before the pandemic, around 2019. I met someone who was one of the vendors at an event I put on, and she was asking me like, what is this work you're doing? And I was explaining it to her. It was a retreat I was hosting, and she said, oh, I'm super into mental wellness and things like that. And she told me that she started ketamine therapy, and she did it because she had some sexual trauma from when she was a child. And it was making it hard for, she was having some intimacy issues with her partner, and she still saw that it was a family member, and she still saw this person, and it was just really uncomfortable. And so she tried it from the encouragement of her therapist. And she said, I do not put this lightly, but it was life-changing. And I said, what's the difference? Like, how do you feel different? And she said that she still has the memories of the sexual trauma, but they don't mean as much to her. And she said they don't carry the heaviness and the meaning that they used to. They don't have the impact that they used to. And so she can be in the same room with that family member, and that family member has profusely apologized, and they've, gone to therapy together to get past it. And she got emotional when she was telling me that it changed her life. And so that was my first kind of introduction to it. And then someone who's gone through it explained it as if, he said, it's sort of like you get to drop all of the negative self-talk and the mind chatter and the insecurities during this time, and you see what's possible. Like, you see how your thinking can change and how your mindset can change. So when you're on the other side, you can actually hold on to that experience and do your best to take that with you into the rest of your days. So is that fair? Those assessments?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. That's what like a conversation I have with people a lot, where it's like, how does having this experience where I see this like actually change me? And I usually say, it's like maybe you had one negative experience, right? That forever changed you, but it forever changed you because it was like a fully embodied, really impactful like moment of your life.
That's your nervous system. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's the process that someone goes through with ketamine therapy, where you're really connecting with yourself at a deeper level. It's like ego reducing. So you're really diving deep within yourself and you're coming across these insights or, memories or, new ways of thinking about something that happened to you from your past. Because it's such a deeply connected experience, like that's maybe a single experience that can be really changing for you. So I think about it in the way of it can work against us negatively when we think about trauma, but in the context of a treatment like this can also work in a positive way for us, where it's like we have this one experience, we see this, we gain this new insight, and it forever changes how we view ourselves and the world around us.
And I don't want to make it sound like it's this miracle thing, this miracle drug. And so is it for everyone? Like, who's the ideal candidate for this?
Yeah, I think that's really important to point out. It's something that I wanted to talk a little bit about is I think, we hear these stories of all the great stories of how this medication can work for some people, but for some people, it doesn't work. There's people who would maybe, from a clinical standpoint, meet all the criteria for being appropriate for treatment. And for whatever reason, they don't see the benefits from the treatment itself. So I think going into it, managing expectations is really important. So if you go in thinking that whatever experience that you read about someone else having online or whatever is going to be your experience, then you're kind of setting yourself up for failure in a way, right? Because you're going to be chasing something that might not be true to you, where your experience on your own could still be, tremendously valuable.
But it tends to be, am I correct in understanding that people who really struggle with anxiety, anxious thoughts, depression, that people, who ruminate and obsess and things like that, that those people tend to be good candidates?
Yes, that's been my experience. It's kind of like how I described a few minutes ago, where you find yourself in this deep meditative state and you're able to experience what it's like to let thoughts come in and thoughts to pass, which we know that meditation is extremely valuable and therapeutic, but a lot of people struggle with meditation.
Yeah, I do.
So ketamine is a really great support for helping create that same deeply meditative space that we know can be therapeutic.
Interesting. Okay. So I'm super curious, because you've been in the mental health space for a long time. How did you get into psychedelic therapy? What was the draw for you? Or was it by accident, on purpose?
One of my main passions going in my career was to have some sort of impact in the mental health space, leveraging innovation, see change happen. I've always known that we're in the midst of a mental health crisis. Overdose and suicide is the leading cause of death for people under 45 in our country. Things don't seem to be getting much better. So all of it was really obvious to me that we needed a new way of doing things. So my initial approach was I thought that going to government institutions, as I figured, the government makes legislation. So if I work for them, I might be able to say hey, there's this great new science or evidence out there, this new technology, let's implement it.
March your way into Capitol Hill. And
right. This is obvious. There's all these papers that say for ketamine, ketamine's 24 years of evidence showing it as a safe, effective, fast-acting treatment that saves lives. So it's just was really obvious to me, go to the place where the people make the laws, where people need the most help. And that's where you would be able to see change happen. And 13 years later, after working in the state hospital system with people who have chronic, serious, debilitating mental illness, working at the VA in Manhattan in outpatient mental health, I just became kind of frustrated. There was a couple opportunities where I had where we piloted different things that were evidence-based, and getting it to move from a small group of people to, nationwide was just not happening. I just didn't think I was going to see it happen in my lifetime. So I started looking for other options out there. That's when I discovered that startups existed and that healthcare technology companies existed. And that's the path that led me to Mindbloom, is really my motivation, my passion to try to take a lot of the great stuff that we have on paper and take it from paper into practice. We have a lot of great science out there, a lot of great evidence to support innovations in mental health care. But the time that it takes to move from paper into practice, I think I saw a statistic that says on average it takes 17 years for published science to get into the hands of the people who really need it. Mm-hmm. So that's what led me to Mindbloom. What led me here is that I associated startups with innovation, and innovation is change. And so that's been exactly my experience in the last 4.5 years with Mindbloom.
Oh, interesting. Okay. We have to take a quick ad break. And then when we come back, I want to ask you what a typical session looks like. So we'll be right back. Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers inline and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/noise, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/noise to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/noise. Today's podcast is sponsored by MIDI Health. Ladies, are you over 40 like me and dealing with hot flashes, insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, some vaginal dryness, or weight gain? Don't just accept it as part of aging. These symptoms are often linked to hormonal changes during perimenopause and menopause. At MIDI Health, they get it. Their experts know what you're going through and how to help. MIDI clinicians are menopause specialists offering safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions. And guess what? MIDI care is covered by insurance. So stop pushing through it alone. Schedule a virtual visit and dive deep into your unique symptoms and health background. You'll walk away feeling heard and with a plan to start feeling better. Visit MIDI Health today and reclaim your well-being. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com. joinmidi.com. Fast forward to the end of 2024 and think about your goals. What can you do right now to give yourself the best chance of succeeding? If you want to learn a new language, you absolutely should get Babbel. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babbel's designed by real people for real conversations. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Now it's so easy to speak simple conversation phrases with the guy that takes care of my lawn without having to consult language apps. Here's a special limited time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/noise. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/noise, spelled BABBEL.com/noise. Rules and restrictions may apply. Okay, we're back. So can you since I'm, as we're recording this, I've never done it before. I kind of know the steps, that you get like 6, I don't even know if it's liquid or pill form, and it dissolves in your mouth. And then you like, what can you describe like your experience going through it? And like, what happens to people?
So do you want me to describe like what a typical session
What a typical session was? Yeah. I don't know if you broke out into like interpretive dance or whatever, but like, if that's not typical, then don't tell us that.
Yeah, no. So I think like the session starts with some of the technical stuff, right? Like you need to have somebody with you, a trusted adult. We go through all like the set and setting process. So like being very mindful about our environment, our setting, and being really mindful about our mindset. So some of the technical things for our safety, taking your blood pressure, having somebody there with you that you feel safe with and that you trust. Making sure that you go to the bathroom, don't drink caffeine before your treatment. Make sure you're not taking any of the medications the clinician told you beforehand. So it's all the technical medical stuff. And then we have the process of like really preparing our mindset. So thinking about what your intentions are. I usually recommend people write it down, say it out loud, turn off, no news, no social media, no emails, anything that can be distracting for you, like cut out at least an hour before and really just like try to connect with what your intentions are. So the experience of the medicine, it starts by taking the medicine. At Mindbloom, we use tablets. So it's sublingually taking a tablet. You hold the medicine in your mouth for 7 minutes, and then you spit it out, and then you lay down and get comfortable. So what that looks like for someone is they essentially have an eye mask on, they have headphones on, and after they spit out the medicine, they're laying down, relaxing, listening to the music through the audio that we provide you in the app. And that experience lasts, you're laying down for about an hour, usually around the 30-minute or so mark. You're like feeling the urge to get up and move around, but I usually like recommend for people to lay down for the full hour. So during those, the initial part of that treatment, what it really feels like is, the closest way I can describe it is like a deep meditation. You might have some visions. You might hear the audio differently. You might have different thoughts come into your mind that you kind of think about or reflect upon. You might have memories from the past come up for you that you kind of see from a different point of view. I always think about it, it's like we're kind of getting into this like third person point of view of ourselves, or like zoomed out and looking at ourselves down below, which is a really valuable experience to have, to see like, hey, like maybe I misinterpreted this differently in some way, or maybe like I always labeled this experience as really bad and scary, but I am re-experiencing this again, and I'm feeling compassion for myself. After the experience, I usually recommend you journal. So it's like write down, maybe try to like take a list of all the things that came up for you, all the thoughts that you had, or maybe you can't remember a lot of it. That's kind of common with ketamine therapy, is like we have this experience and then we come out and it's hard to remember, to grasp onto some of those insights that were coming up for us during the session. So then I find it can be really helpful to just put the pen to paper and let like a stream of consciousness come to play. Just get out whatever it is that's coming out for you at that time. So usually around the 90-minute mark after taking the medicine, you're feeling pretty good, able to get up and move around. And the next day, there's not like a hangover or kind of negative effect the next day. Most people get a good night's sleep and wake up feeling, fresh and rejuvenated for the day.
So the thing that I'm really interested too is sort of the integration. And so I know that a lot of people who do ketamine or any kind of psychedelic therapy work with a therapist or a coach to sort of debrief and unpack, if you will, not only what they heard or saw or felt or experienced during the session, during the experience, but also afterwards, like what comes up for them. So can you talk to us and like, please go into as much detail as you want, as like, because that's what I think we're all interested in. Like how are people's minds going to be different, thoughts going to be, and some people, and like you were saying, like some people don't really feel any different, right? Like I don't want people to have the expectation again that their lives are totally going to be changed.
Right.
So what is it like for people in terms of like the quote unquote therapy or integration afterwards?
Yeah, so I think there's a difference between therapy and integration. So there's absolutely people going through ketamine therapy that need a therapist involved, especially people with PTSD or significant past trauma that they haven't really worked through processing. So I want to just kind of separate those two things. So on the therapy side of things, how ketamine works is you think about ketamine as a psycholytic. So remember how I mentioned it's ego reductive,
yes.
Allows us to access the deeper parts within ourselves and bring up this content to the surface. A lot of that might be heavy content, and that's where the therapist comes in. You do a session one day, and the next day you have maybe a session set up with your therapist. So you do medicine one day, meet with the therapist the next day, you bring your journal and you talk about all the things that came up for you, and you work on processing. Maybe this is stuff that you haven't had access to in therapy in the past. A lot of times when we're in therapy, kind of feel like we hit a wall and we're not making progress. And ketamine does a great job at like breaking that wall down to allow us access to more content that we really need to work through in therapy.
So the example, I'm going to pause for a second. The example that I gave you of the person that I talked to who she specifically did ketamine therapy to work through some of that sexual trauma. So that probably sounds like an example of like, you'd want to book your therapist the following day specifically to talk about that.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Think about if it's processing heavy content from the past, you're probably going to need some support in doing that. And the way I think about integration, it's a lot more focused on the future and change. So usually when we think about intention setting, kind of think about our psyche as like a spider web. And there's trying to identify like where in that spider web has like something flown into it and created damage and punctured it. So it's like this hole or this like empty space in our psyche. And that might be in an area around like relationships or meaning and purpose in your life or your health, right? So really trying to identify like what is it, where is it that like I need to do some healing, and create your intentions from that. So it starts with the intention. And then the integration process is really an act of like, how do I take that intention and the content that came up for me during my session and use that to patch up some of the holes, right? Some of those places that I feel like there's something missing. One of the things that I think is, or a couple of steps that I think are helpful with that is when you're going through your notes, after you've done a session, really try to pull out like what are the key points, summarize it into a few key bullet points, and think about that as like these are things that are going to become my mantra or my takeaway from this session. And every day engage with that somehow. If it's when you're brushing your teeth and you're going through those like main takeaways from your session. So really taking it and integrating it into your life somehow. Maybe it's like I am going to brush my teeth every day, right? So it's like you're taking that intention and taking the action to apply it in your life. So it's not a passive process. And I think it's important for people to know that. I think we've been trained in medicine or receiving medicine that you take something and it fixes you. Like in this process, you are an active participant. And that's really key to take the changes or those insights and not let it just be an insight that's in your journal that gets put in a drawer somewhere, but something that like, again, becomes a part of you and repairs those holes or that damage.
Yeah. So I guess it then becomes like any kind of personal development work that you do, you have to actually put it to work for you and not just put your notes away and be like, well, that was interesting.
Right. Yeah. Put it to work. Exactly.
Well, how does someone prepare for this in terms of like, can you give us some examples of what some good intentions are? I
mean, I think intentions are really personal.
Yeah.
So it would really be helpful. I think if you're struggling with figuring out what your intentions are, and we start talking about intentions with our clients during the intake. So the first step of the Mindbloom process is doing a full psychiatric evaluation. And we're not just, reviewing your medical history, your psychiatric history and all that. We're talking from that first interaction about intention setting, like what are your goals from this treatment? I find that sometimes maybe my best advice about intention setting is like, keep it simple, keep it something to where you're like one line that you can repeat to yourself and then you let that go. Because what we don't want to do is have our intention kind of take hold of an experience. Because I always think about like, if you knew what you really needed enough to write your intention, then there's a likelihood that you would probably start feeling better.
Solution.
Right,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Like if you knew what you needed, you might not be where you are now. So the idea of like setting your intention, but not having an agenda for the experiences and letting go and like actually seeing what you truly need from a deeper level.
Yeah. Because I've thought about that. As we're recording this, my appointment is next week with the clinician. And I've always had the intent, anytime I go to a wellness retreat or even am trying to meditate or in prayer or whatever it is. So I used to be attached, and say like, here's what I need, like, give me this. And I stopped doing that probably 10 or so years ago. And now I do my best just to have the intention of being open to receive whatever it is that I need in that moment. And even when I have a brand new client that I'm working with, I'll say, please give me whatever open heart or strength or patience or knowledge to work with this particular client and her particular situation. So I think the less attached we are, the better.
Yeah. We use 3 letters called TLO, which is trust, let go, be open. So even just starting with there, I mean, if you think about how hard, like that sounds so basic, right? Like trust, let go, be open.
I know that's not basic.
So hard, so if your intention is to just do that, like the act of you seeing yourself being able to do that in and of itself is therapeutic, right?
Yeah. Well, I know that that ketamine specifically has been in the news negatively lately. So can you tell us about any myths that you see going around that you always like to dispel for people?
Yeah, I think one myth that maybe relates to Mindbloom is that Mindbloom's an online ketamine provider. You show up and you're given a ketamine prescription and you're sent on your way.
Oh, I know that it's not that way. There's a lot of hoops to jump through.
Yeah.
I'm already experiencing that.
Yeah, but even that, like it's not just the medicine. I mean, we understand that the medicine by itself could be extremely valuable for a lot of people, like the data tells us that, but we really believe that it's critical for safety and critical when we think about how does a person get the most out of this, that ketamine is done within the context of a therapeutic container. As an example, at Mindbloom, you have your clinician that you're able to access throughout your program for support. You have a psychedelic coach or an integration coach or guide that is there with you for your first session. You have an integration, one-to-one integration session with them where you can process and go through some of your experiences with them. We have educational content or programs that people go through along with the program or with the medicine sessions that is focused on different, not just like disorders, like this is the depression program, but like things that are more like practical in life, like recovering from rejection and failure as an example. So like that learning content along the way, and then a great community of support. So we have a good peer network. We have a bunch of integration circles where it's like a group setting where it's facilitated by a guide, and there might be 8 or so other clients.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, working together. And then we have a great online community too on Facebook. I think there's well over 500 active members daily. So I think like all that comes to say is that like it's not just the medicine. And I really truly believe that it's that container that keeps people safe and really helps people get the most out of it.
Awesome. So what is the most common question that you get from people when you tell them what you do?
Is this safe? Is it going to work for me? What does it feel like?
Mm-hmm. And so what is your answer when do you have like a blanket response, especially around safety and will it work for me?
Yeah. So what I usually tell people when they ask if it's safe, I tell them that, ketamine is a safe and effective medication that's been validated by well over 2 decades of evidence in the treatment of mental health indications like depression and anxiety. At Mindbloom, we published a study last year with the outcomes from over 1,200 individuals that went through our program. It's the largest ever ketamine therapy study. And this is people following our protocol. And our side effect rate was less than 5%. We think about SSRIs, it's usually around 40%. Mm-hmm. So generally like very well tolerated medication for people and effective for most people. I think our outcomes from that study showed that 89% of people responded in some degree to the therapy, and about 63% of people reported an over 50% reduction in their symptoms.
I remember I took a screenshot of those stats as I remember that those jumped out at me a lot. We need to take one more ad break, and when we come back, I want to ask you something about music. So we'll be right back. I have definitely been in that place where my paycheck ran out before the next one got here. Life doesn't happen bi-weekly, so why should payday? The money you earn can be in your hands today with Earnin. Earnin is an app that gives you access to your pay as you work, up to $100 per day or up to $750 per pay period. Just download the Earnin app and verify your paycheck. Then access up to $100 a day as you work and leave an optional tip. Any money you access plus tips are automatically repaid from your next paycheck. You can use Earnin to pay for a girls' night out, a last-minute gift for a loved one, or even summer camp for the kids. Make Earnin a part of your financial routine and join Earnin's over 3.5 million customers who say things like, when I think about Earnin, I think about financial stability, security. It gives me a lot of peace of mind. Download Earnin today, spelled EARNIN in the Google Play or Apple App Store. When you download the Earnin app, type in noise under podcast when you sign up. It really, really helps the show. Noise under podcast. Subject to your available earnings, location, daily max, and pay period max. See earnin.com/TOS for details. Earnin is a financial technology company, not a bank. Bank products are issued by Evolve Bank and Trust, member FDIC. You know, when you're listening to a song on the radio and you get the profound feeling that the song playing was written about you? Now imagine having the power to gift that same incredible feeling to someone you love with an original song from Songfinch that actually is written just for them. Songfinch lets you create an original radio quality song inspired by your own life and the people you love. It's completely unique, personal, and lasts forever. Whether your song is for Father's Day, an upcoming graduation, wedding, or anniversary, or even just a gift to show your loved one how much you care, start your song now to lock in one of Songfinch's top artists. I gifted Songfinch to myself, a song about my late father, and I'm so excited to play you a clip.
Flipping through the slides of learning how to live and how to love, and coming undone, a father daughters without, so she writes it down.
One of my clients heard about Songfinch from this podcast, and so she had a song created for her son who was graduating, and she told me that they both cried when she played it for him and that it exceeded her expectations. For a limited time, Songfinch is letting our listeners upload their song to Spotify for free, so you and the lucky person you gift it to can listen to it anywhere, anytime. Go to songfinch.com/noise and start your song. After you purchase, you'll be prompted to add Spotify streaming for your original song for free, a $50 value. Again, my URL is songfinch.com/noise. Don't forget to share your song with us too. songfinch.com/noise.
I'd like to introduce you to the Minimalist Moms podcast. It's hard enough being a mom, and the last thing you need is stress from too much stuff and an overcrowded schedule. For too long, I lived with the mindset that bigger was better, and the more I added to my life, instead of feeling better, I felt overwhelmed. It was time for a radical new mindset. Less is more. I'm not into extremes. I didn't throw everything away. My brand of minimalism is more about adding than subtracting. Get rid of the excess to make room for what you love. In other words, it's about living life with purpose. I hope you'll listen in, and my guest and myself can inspire you to think more and do with less. The Minimalist Moms podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Okay, I want to ask you on a personal note. We were chatting before we started recording, and you said that you are, I don't know if it's like a hobby of yours around EDM music, which for people that don't know, stands for electronic dance music, which I love, which I've loved forever, for decades. I actually went to raves in the 90s. I was just thinking about this. Like, I saw something on TikTok or Instagram about going to raves in the 2000s, and I was like, okay, do they know the route that we went in the 90s, where literally there was a Taco Bell in the town that I lived in where this guy worked, and you would have to go through the drive-thru at Taco Bell to ask him the address of, because it was always like these abandoned warehouses.
Yeah.
Sometimes they would get broken up by the cops, and sometimes we'd get lucky and they wouldn't. And you hoped that the guy was working those protections. Anyway, it makes me laugh to think back many, many years ago on that.
Map points.
So, but I mean, even before that, we had Thomas Brothers maps, like trying, with a flashlight in the car. So I know that music can be incredibly therapeutic to people. So is there any kind of music in particular that, I don't know if there's been research on this around and the connection between psychedelic therapy and certain kinds of music, or is it just really depend on personal preference? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, so I've obviously spent a lot of time thinking about the music, and I've trialed a lot of different kinds of playlists and soundtracks, and I've read a ton of people's feedback of their experiences. And what I found is that everybody just kind of has something that they like or that feels better for them. I myself like the more like ascension type tracks that are more like uplifting, and the binaural beats for me, if they're a little bit more dark, I don't really like too much because I feel like it can kind of get me in a darker headspace. So I like the ascension kind of soundtracks, or bring you up because the sound frequencies raise you up. So some people also too really like organic sounds or like nature sounds. So that's another group of the kind of audio tracks that people might be into. One thing is important is like trial the music for yourself, listen to it.
Wow.
If you have, at Mindbloom, we produce our own audio. So we've got that covered for you. And there's all different, like, do you want spoken word throughout? Do you want spoken word just at the beginning? Do you want nature? All of that. So there's a whole
you get to
variety.
pick.
But
Okay.
yeah, but just
Interesting.
listen through it, because I've seen people have that experience where it's like the audio track for 15 minutes sounds like this, and then something changes up and then it gets darker.
Yeah.
And then kind of take their experience on a different track.
It's interesting. One of the reasons that I wanted to try ketamine therapy is you've mentioned SSRIs a few times, and I have had experience with them since around 2003. I was prescribed my very first one. I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder after having pretty debilitating panic attacks, and it changed my life for the better. Like it truly, how I was living was just unmanageable. And so SSRIs definitely helped. And then I was in my late 20s at the time and was able to learn how to manage the symptoms. And also I was in a relationship that wasn't great, that was contributing to the anxiety. And then I think when I started to get better, more healthy mentally, I realized, and I was sort of on and off them for a while after my kids were born. I realized the thing that I really didn't like about it is that I felt muted. So there'd be so many times where something would happen and I would think to myself, I should be crying right now. Like if this were really how I am authentically, I would be feeling a lot more emotional than I am right now. And so honestly, that was one of the main reasons that I've gotten off them over the years. And I haven't been on one since I would say like the beginning of 2021. And from what I understand, that ketamine can sometimes give us the same results that an SSRI would without that side effect of feeling, I don't know, is there a clinical term for that?
Yeah, I mean, I would call it like affective flattening.
Yes, affect. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're just kind of you're not feeling bad, but
right.
You're not feeling great. You're not like things like, it's not bad to cry, right? So it's like if we see something, what ends up happening, it's like, I'm supposed to emotionally respond to this. Like I'm supposed to be moved by this. And if we're not, it signals for us like something's off, right? Like I'm not
disconnected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you feel disconnected. Like nothing's really like getting you moving or feeling anything on an emotional level. It's not a good feeling.
And I do think that SSRIs can be great for people, but that's one of the reasons I got interested in psychedelic therapy is that you don't tend to not have that lasting side effect. One more question for you before we close up, and that's, what advice do you have for someone who's considering ketamine therapy as part of their mental health treatment plan, or just like their path forward in their own personal growth?
Yeah, so I think the first step would be talking to a professional. I think we might find ourselves online trying to dig through a lot of information. And right now there's a lot of information out there that can be really confusing. And sometimes if we do that, we might like overgeneralize things, or people are leaving out things that will be like important for you and your individualized plan of care. So I say like the first step would be talking to a professional and seeing if this is an opportunity for you. If you're struggling, like don't struggle, like reach out for help. And that would be the first step.
Okay. Before we close up, is there anything else that you want to circle back to that you want to make sure that you say, or that you want to sort of underscore?
Yeah. So one thing I realized I didn't touch on earlier was around the question about what is ketamine therapy. So one thing I just wanted to point out is that ketamine therapy as a term is kind of like an umbrella term. So ketamine therapy can mean a lot of different things. So if you're interested in exploring ketamine therapy, it's important to ask, like, what does ketamine therapy at X practice, what does that include? Is it just the medicine, or does it include some of that therapeutic container or support along with it? Other important thing to find out is like, how is the medicine going to be given to me? Is it, your ketamine comes in all different forms, so whether it's tablets, intranasal, injectable. So make sure you find out what's included and what form the medication's in.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you so much. And listeners, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you being here. I know that you know that I am so grateful for your time, and I appreciate you. And remember, it's our life's journey to make ourselves better humans, and our life's responsibility to make the world a better place. Bye for now. Hey listeners, if you work for a company that does professional development, did you know that I offer leadership training, more specifically empathy and assertiveness and how it makes stronger teams? You can see more on my speaking page at andreaowen.com/speaking, where there's also a contact button there so you can fill out that form and let's chat.
Hey there, I'm Debbie Reber, the founder of Tilt Parenting and the author of the book Differently Wired. The mission of Tilt is to change the way neurodivergence, whether that's having a learning disability, having ADHD, being gifted, autistic, or some combination of all of the above, is perceived and experienced so differently wired kids and the parents like us raising them can truly thrive. On the Tilt Parenting podcast, I get to talk with authors, therapists, educators, and parenting experts who are committed to this mission. I ask the questions my listeners are most curious about when it comes to supporting our kids. And in turn, my guests share strategies for challenges, out-of-the-box ideas for navigating school, best practices for therapies, tips for advocating, and so many thoughtful insights on what it really takes to help our kids grow up feeling seen and respected so they can create awesome lives for themselves. I know that raising a differently wired kid can feel overwhelming and isolating, but I promise you, you are not alone, and it can feel so much better. If you're on this parenting journey, come listen to Tilt Parenting. Together, we can shift this paradigm and show up for our exceptional kids with hope, possibility, and joy.